Good morning, everybody. And I'm so proud to be joined by Senator Cantwell, our ranking, I'm so proud to be joined by Senator Cantwell, our ranking member on the Commerce Committee, and Ben Ray Luján, who's a member of the Commerce Committee and also head of a subcommittee on the Agriculture Committee dealing with food and prices. And I thank all of you. This is a very distinguished panel who has a lot of expertise in this area, and we thank you for coming here. Many of you traveled from far away to be here and help inform Congress, the Senate, and the public about what we can do to get these food prices and the household good prices down. Now, this roundtable is our latest event in Senate Democrats' lower cost initiative. This initiative that's going to continue throughout this year, not only because we feel it's important, but more importantly, the American people feel it's important. In Trump's America, families are being crushed in every direction. Adequately feed their children. Got to curb myself. What an insult. I was going to use an adjective that began with F. I won't. Instead of real relief for working people, what did Trump give us? A chaotic trade war that only raised prices for families. It devastated farmers. It devastated ranchers. It hurt small businesses like grocers and restaurants. I've been all across New York talking to restaurateurs who are having big trouble in both ways. In one way that they can't afford some of the stuff they need, and in the other, since their customers have less money, they're showing up less. Farmers, it devastated ranchers. It hurt small businesses like grocers and restaurants. I've been all across New York talking to restaurateurs who are having big trouble in both ways. In one way that they can't afford some of the stuff they need, and in the other, since their customers have less money, they're showing up less at these restaurants. He's doing nothing to stop the corporate monopolies, all kinds of campaign contributions and even shares in their own businesses, self-enriching them. Now, the Trump administration's policies have actively encouraged monopolies. Today's roundtable is about understanding the forces driving up food prices and household costs and what Congress can now do to fix the damage and build a fairer and more competitive food system. We'll hear from experts. This is a great panel. Those of you who know this area know what a fabulous panel this is. Those of you who don't will learn it soon. We're going to hear from experts, advocates, workers, farmers, small business owners about what they're seeing on the ground and what we should do to deliver change. And as part of this roundtable, we are releasing a report today, Trump's Broken Promises Devastating America's Farmers and Working Families. In each area we cover, we're putting out a Broken Promises report. The one, you may have read the one we've done on housing last month. I'm grateful to my colleagues for their leadership and partnership on this issue and for joining this important conversation. Particular thanks to Senators Cantwell and Luján for leading the discussion today and for doing so much in these areas. And with that, I want to turn it over to Senator Cantwell for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Leader Schumer, and thank you for convening this roundtable and focusing on the rising costs that Americans are having to pay and how it affects them and their households and affects our economy overall. I'm so glad to be joined by our colleague, Senator Ben Ray Luján from New Mexico, who is a great member of the Commerce Committee and fights on many of these issues, but particularly on broadband affordability. This is a subject we could spend all day here just picking the subject. Why the Republican policies have made broadband more expensive. We could talk about PBMs, about how they don't want to rein in the bad practices of PBMs. We could talk about fuel costs and how they don't want to properly police fuel markets. We could talk about, and one of my favorite issues of late is how much the larger monopolies are putting more and more sports content behind paywalls, literally making it harder for Americans to just access what their regional, local team was doing and playing, and obviously undermining the very flow of revenue that local journalism depends on that helps us create perfect information. So by ignoring these things, the Republicans, basically, as my colleague Senator Schumer just said, don't want to police the markets. In the Commerce Committee, we try very hard to pass legislation that does just that. And in addition, they try to neuter the very agencies that also are responsible for policing the markets. But because we have so many people here from rural America, I want to talk specifically about our nation's food supply and about the family farm, how consolidation and reduced competition in farming and in the grocery business leads directly to higher prices for consumers. This is important, I believe, because competition is vital to keeping prices affordable for consumers, and American farmers and ranchers are under extreme financial strain. The average farm operating loan size increased by 30% in 2025, and USDA estimates that farm debt will rise to a record of more than $620 billion in 2026. So right there, we should just grasp, if we want to try to make food more affordable, the fact that we have less and less people providing it is a real issue. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end just there. The Farm Bureau recently reported that over 300 farms filed for bankruptcy in 2025. That is a 46% increase compared to 2024. And this doesn't account for farm operations that did not qualify for bankruptcy. Many farms don't even declare bankruptcy. They make the tough decisions to sell the land, limit production, or close farming altogether. Why is this happening? Because the costs are rising and markets are closing. Costs are rising, and if you don't do anything to police the big meat packing places that rise the cost of beef by having a monopoly, if you don't do anything to talk about the options to open in markets, the cost of tariffs, one of the largest input for farmers is fertilizer. 4 companies control 61% of nitrogen, 75% of phosphate, 82% of potash markets, meaning just 4 companies dominate the U.S. fertilizer supply market. Wheat growers from my state have told me they faced an estimated excess of $40 to $100 million annually from these fertilizer prices. Farmers do not have the margins to buy new equipment, so they face higher costs and keep aging equipment running. Cash rents and farm values are at a record high as a result. Interest expenses are expected to reach a record $33 billion in 2026, so these people are getting hit every which way. All of this on top of a trade war, shutting down and threatening export markets. I hear from producers of my state, which is a big ag state, and the big exporters like markets like China and even British Columbia for potatoes are essentially gone. And now what's happening, which I don't think most people realize, is the world of competition has changed. You know, it used to be we could compete in these Asian markets, but now what's happened is China and India, I just met with the potato growers yesterday, China and India are now in the potato business, and guess where they're going? They're going to Vietnam and to Colombia and Singapore, and the competition from them is growing, all while President Trump is taking us and putting us on the sidelines. So this is unsustainable. Family farms cannot experience significant cost increase to their operations and at the same time lose some of their best customers. That is why we have seen 3,700 farms close in the state of Washington from 2017 to 2022, and more than 2 farms per day. That's more than 2 farms per day. Nationally, 140,000 farms were lost during the same period. An estimated 20,000 farms shut down over the last 2 years. So we have to do more. I want to say, though, that consolidation also affects the food industry in groceries. The FTC studied grocery mergers in 2012 and found that mergers do not lower grocery prices. And as a result, you're paying higher prices if you are the consumer. In Washington state, the proposed grocery merger between Alberts and Kroger's would have raised grocery prices for consumers by 5% in Albertsons stores and 8% in Kroger stores. This would have resulted in my state consumers paying around $800 million more in higher grocery prices. Thankfully, the merger was blocked by the Washington Attorney General and the FTC. And I will note that in all of this information, the Kroger people even admitted, yes, we've raised these prices and we kept them high. Why? Because we could. It was just astounding. This is why we need a strong antitrust enforcer at the FTC to protect our markets from unlawful mergers and monopolies that drive up prices for consumers, including farmers. And I'm glad to see that antitrust and consumer experts, labor leaders, farm cattle ranchers, and others are speaking about this, but it just barely scratches the surface. We live in this information age and people are taking advantage. It's time for our Republican Senate colleagues to stand up and do something about this. You can take the president for whatever. He doesn't care. But now it's time to find out whether our Republican colleagues care about these farm communities that they represent. And I obviously want to continue to fight to get refunds for tariffs for the manufacturers that also impact consumer pricing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Luján.
Leader Schumer, thank you for bringing us together today. Ranking Member Cantwell as well, for all the work that you do day in and day out. Look, to sum this up, American families are struggling to put food on the table. That's what this comes down to. I also want to recognize the work that was done in the release of the document that Leader Schumer announced today, recognizing the negative impact of farmers and ranchers as well. Because we need to recognize who's getting hurt here across the country. In rural parts of America, our producers are hurting. The cost of fertilizer, I mean, heck, I don't know if anyone in this room has a tractor to work on. I do. You can't afford the parts if you can find them. You can't get a new one. You can't afford the inputs anymore. It's getting harder and harder and harder and just more and more expensive. I want to recognize not just the farmers and ranchers, but the farm workers, the grocery store workers, the packers, the shippers, and the processors who make sure that there's food on the shelf. But we should not lose sight of the fact that so many people across the country, when they're in the grocery store, and they might put something in the basket, and they realize that they might not be able to afford it, they put it back on the shelf. Or if they're checking out and they realize that the cost of that grocery bill just went a little too high, they can't afford what's rest, they have to take things off and ask them to put it away. Even though their kids might be there and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. This president doesn't care. And look, in a country with the abundance that we have in the United States of America, making people hungrier is a policy choice from this administration. It's not inevitable. We can do things better across the country. And the last things that I'll share, Leader Schumer, which you reminded us about, when President Trump said on day one that he would lower prices for the American people, well, it's a year later and everything is more expensive than when he took office, and it was already getting bad. He's not doing a damn thing about it. When our Republican colleagues, during that big betrayal bill, that big beautiful bill that they moved, cut the food programs in the country at the largest level we've ever seen, we as Democrats led an effort to say, look, we know that we can do better, and I'm going to give you a chance to protect your constituents and make sure that food scarcity is not something they have to struggle with every day. And we gave them a vote. It was simple. It said just reverse the cuts that President Trump wants to see with these food programs, SNAP programs. They voted it down. A couple weeks later, we said, all right, you're hearing from your constituents. You understand the pain that they're faced with. We're going to give you one more chance to vote the right way. And they blocked it and voted it down again. The American people are tired of this. And I want to appreciate what we're going to hear today from every one of our panelists today with what you're sharing, that you're hearing from regular folks across the country and making this abundantly clear. So, Mr. Schumer, thank you, Leader, for bringing us together, and to everyone here, thanks for being here today, and to all the journalists, thanks for covering this.
Thank you. Before we get into our panelists, I hope everyone, did we give everyone a copy of our report? Everyone good? It's called Broken Promises, Devastating America's Farmers and Working Families. Maria brought up, it's not just the consolidation in the food industry, as bad as that is, but the ancillary industries. She brought up the fertilizer industry. But listen to this, 95% of farm tractor production and maintenance is 3 companies. And here's what the evidence shows. When 4 or fewer companies control more than 40% of the market, there is great and heightened risk of prices going up, as Maria talked about with Albertsons and Kroger's. Well, our first guest is Tim Wu, someone I've known a long time and worked with on many issues. He's just a great advocate on these issues, and somebody I always look forward to learning from whenever he comes by. He's a leading voice on competition policy and market power. Thank you, Professor Wu. You have the floor.
Thank you
He's from Columbia University, I should add.
I'm from the proud state of New York, I want to mention also. Thank you, Leader Schumer. Thank you, Senator Cantwell and Senator Luján. Thank you for having me. I want to, in my 2 minutes here, take aim at a particular line of thought, which is very common, even though not always stated. It's been dominant since the 1980s, and it's the idea that, you know, whatever happens with affordability, there's really nothing to be done. And ultimately, these are problems that are unfixable. What I want to say today is that things have been better at parts of U.S. history, and in fact, things could, as bad as they are now, could get a lot worse. That we have set up a system that tolerates unlimited consolidation toward monopoly in multiple markets, and we're on a path that I think will even look now, will make now look better in retrospect, unless we do something about it. So we must take more action. I think the kind of things we've been talking about almost are not at the scale of the problem, and I want to talk about that in the remaining 50 seconds. I think what we face is a problem that we have not always grappled with, was the problem of middleman power. You know, we're more familiar with the problem of producer power or retailers. We have a lot of industries where the power is in the middle, and it sucks both from the producers and from the consumer and keeps the money in the middle and channels it forward. That's a huge problem in meat processing. It's a huge problem in an enormous number of these industries, pharmaceuticals, you name it. And I think we need, at the scale of the second part of the New Deal, a new effort to understand and tackle this problem of middleman power. We have some old laws, but it is a problem that needs a renewed emphasis, and that's what I would recommend to this committee, along with the reinvigoration of something that is often said to be, has often been doubted, which is actual price gouging laws for the situations where we have genuine, obvious price gouging going on in the economy. There's a big agenda. We need strong, decisive action, or I say it again, things will get much worse, and we'll look back at now and think that was a relative paradise.
And it's true, in the food industry, there's a lot of these the distributors who put the stranglehold rather than the producers.
Yeah.
Who may be a lot of little farmers. Our next guest is Rob LaRue. He's the head of the National Farmers Union, who represent family farmers and ranchers dealing with these market dynamics every day. President LaRue, please go ahead.
Thank you, Leader.
There you are.
Thank you, Leader Schumer and Senators Cantwell and Luján for holding this discussion today. It's an important one. As you noted, NFU is the nation's second largest general farm organization, representing more than 230,000 family farmers and ranchers across the country, including new and beginning farmers, as well as established farmers who are wondering whether or not they're going to be able to continue in this important business. We're facing immense challenges in the economy. Consumers are facing increased costs, as noted, including the food needed to nourish their families. And at the same time, family farmers are working harder than ever while earning less. In 2025, as Senator Cantwell noted, Chapter 12 bankruptcy filings increased by nearly 50%, and this is the second year in a row of an increase. But not all farmers qualify for Chapter 12, and so I think this masks the larger problem that is out there across the countryside. The farmer's share of the retail food dollar, which Farmers Union has been updating monthly for many decades, is at near all-time lows, less than 16 cents on the food dollar. This is contrasted with 1980, where not only did we see the shift in mergers and the consolidation in agriculture, but at that time, the farmer's share of the food dollar was 37 cents. Trade disruptions are compounding these challenges, raising food prices for the American consumers and increasing production costs for farmers across virtually every sector. Farmers need immediate relief, much like consumers do, and we need long-term structural reforms to farm policy to restore the financial viability of our farms and fair prices for everyone. Since we were founded in 1902, at a time when the first antitrust laws were put into effect, and many of our farmers worked to put those into effect, we continue today to fight through our Fairness for Farmers campaign, asking the federal government to more vigorously enforce our antitrust and pro-competition laws. We need to pair anti-monopoly efforts with policies that create new markets and opportunities for family farmers to reverse this cycle of depressed commodity prices. We must ensure everyone can access and afford to put food on a table. Ultimately, as farmers, we grow food in order to feed people. NFU has and will continue to advocate for the important programs like SNAP, WIC, and other food assistance programs, and we need to do more to connect consumers to those who grow it. And so we continue to push for a permanently established program to support local and regional food procurement programs to do just this. Thank you again for convening this important discussion. Look forward to the continuing talk.
Thank you for your excellent suggestions. Next, we'll hear from Michael Kadis, who has deep experience in antitrust enforcement and competition policy. He's from the Nakawati law firm. Mr. Kadis.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senator Cantwell and Senator Luján, for having me here.
Turn on your mic, yeah. Some monopolist is interfering with it.
Okay,
There is
no,
a-
that works. I'm sorry. Hopefully that doesn't count against my 2 minutes, because then I would just say thank you. Again, thank you, Senator Schumer, Senator Cantwell, Senator Luján, for giving me the opportunity to talk about such an important issue, one we feel every day of the week, 3 times at least, whenever we are consuming food. And I want to build on something Tim said, which he pointed to middlemen. I was the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust Enforcement under the Biden administration, was one of them. And I was responsible for competition in the agricultural sector. Let me tell you, Tim is right. It is a middleman problem. While I was there, we went after Cargill and Wayne Sanderson for engaging in a conspiracy to lower the wages of the folks working in their processing plant. These are some of the hardest, worst jobs in the economy, and still, they would rather just pay them less. We went after chicken processors for treating their growers in an unfair and deceptive manner. We filed a case against a so-called information sharing organization, AgriStats, that really just allowed the packers to raise prices and not compete. We did all of that. I am proud of that. But let me tell you, we didn't do enough. More needed to be done, and I wish we had done more, and particularly in cattle. So I want to talk about the middleman problem. And the way I like to start is, in a situation where we have high costs, middlemen often spend their time protecting their profits by passing the buck. And so in beef, what are we hearing? Packers said, well, the herd's too small, and so the beef price is too high. Like they're innocent bystanders. They're not. They're part of the problem. For the last 4 decades, the 4 dominant meat packers have spent their time figuring out how not to compete for cattle so that they can buy cattle at a lower price. And if you keep buying cattle at a low price for a long time, you end up with less ranchers. You end up with a smaller herd, which is the cause of the higher price. And this isn't just a theory. This is what happens when markets don't work. And we can see it happening right now. Instead of pushing to increase capacity, the packers are busy closing plants. They're telling the ranchers, don't expand your herd. Because if you do, we're not going to have the capacity to buy it.
I can't.
So that's why this conversation matters. For too long, market power has spread through food markets like a weed choking off competition. And if we want lower food prices and stronger rural communities, we have to confront the dominant power of packers, power that holds down what ranchers earn while increasing the price of beef that we all pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Maria, we were originally going to have each of you speak the whole time, but we may run out of time because we have to end at 12:30. So if someone has a prescient question, like Maria does,
Well, I'm just curious.
I'll interrupt.
I'm just curious. He saw me maneuvering over here. I was getting so upset because I've heard this so much from my grower. You know, when you think about it, cattlemen have to grow the beef at a price. So you expect the market to remain relatively adherent to that price. But when you're these packers and you have so much power and you can change the market dynamic, we're gonna let so much Canadian beef in. Well, okay, if you let a bunch of Canadian beef in, then you're going to drive down the price, right at the time that harvesting is coming. So why can't you be more, well, maybe what we need is an unfair and deceptive practice law on specific things, because we are saying that they are manipulating the market. I did a lot of work on Enron, so I'm very familiar with how companies do things to manipulate it, schemes. And so shouldn't we just take some of these schemes, like we're trying to do with PBMs that are being blocked by the Republicans? Why not put some more specific laws that these are either manipulative or unfair and deceptive practices, and just call them out in statute?
So I think that's exactly right. We do have tools to go after that. The courts have made it more difficult, but I also think we are now at a place, this has gone long enough, we need a legislative solution to fix the marketplace. Enforcement just takes too long and is too uncertain. These ranchers have been waiting for the government to step in for 40 years. They shouldn't have to wait a day longer.
Thank you.
Might
Mr.
I
Davis.
add one thing? There is something specific, legislative, that can be done, that the Biden administration attempted. Not only can government bring actions, but under the Packers and Stockyards Act, so can ranchers and farmers. Yet the courts are split as to whether or not you have to prove harm to competition, which means if you have to bring harm to competition, it's not just about the harm they did to you as a farmer or rancher individually, but what it does to the whole industry, bringing in Sherman and Clayton Act. So I would suggest that the Democrat senators join together, push legislation that would restore a farmer or rancher's individual right to bring an action under the Packers and Stockyards Act.
Okay, I'm just so, we faced this with gas prices for a long time too. And the manipulation laws that were originally on the books at the SEC, people described them as a little acorn that grew into a mighty oak. And again, that is what we have used on, energy markets of late. So when you say somebody has manipulated, it's just, have you used a manipulative device or contrivance to manipulate the market? I think it's a different standard, but it's working well for us in natural gas and electricity, and in some cases, fuel. But I think we should try that standard, because it's easier to prove, and the Enron case was so crazy, like they came up with scheme after scheme. And that's what these people are doing. But when you go the antitrust route, you have to prove collusion, that they colluded with a bunch of people. It's not collusion, they're just cooking up schemes to keep the market artificially high.
Great. Let me, and please, we're going to try to open it up a little more, so feel free to join in as Mr. Maxwell did. Next person I want to call on is Basil Musharbesh. He's with the Anti-Monopoly Council, and they represent family farmers, small businesses, local governments in antitrust and advocacy, and should be a good follow-on to the discussion right here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leader Schumer and senators. Over the past 5 years, our law firm, Anti-Monopoly Council, has investigated monopolization and the elimination of competition in every major industry in the food supply chain. Oh, sorry. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Like I was saying, over the past 5 years, our law firm, Anti-Monopoly Council, has investigated monopolization and the elimination of competition in every major industry in the food and agriculture system. Based on that work, I wanted to share 3 main findings with you today. The first is that we no longer have truly free markets in the food supply chain. Either a single monopolist or a tight oligopoly controls each of the major industries involved. 4 multinationals dominate seeds and pesticides for most major crops. Single firms have monopoly power over each of the 3 major types of fertilizer. 1 corporation wields monopoly power over new farm tractors. 5 conglomerates share power over the nation's meat and poultry supply. 4 grain trading giants share power over the processing of wheat, corn, and soybeans. Nearly all of the country's fluid milk comes from just 3 companies. A supermajority of egg production is controlled by just 5 companies. And 4 national chains now capture around 70% of all grocery sales in America. These self-appointed autocrats of trade are the primary
I
drivers.
just want to, people don't know this. They think, oh, it's all little mom and pop farmers and stuff who go right to them. It's really important people understand the monopolization, both in the primary but also in the secondary markets. Please.
Thank you, Senator. It's become a systemic feature of our food system, and these self-appointed autocrats of trade are the primary drivers of today's unaffordable food prices. Let's start at the top of the supply chain. For example, the seed and pesticide oligopoly led by Bayer has trapped grain farmers into dependency on a narrow set of glyphosate pesticides and GMO seeds by creating patent thickets around key technologies and taking other steps to disable innovation by independent firms. As a result, this oligopoly has been able to charge skyrocketing prices for seed and pesticide bundles, whose efficacy is declining, and that, to add insult to injury, seem to give farmers cancer. Not to be outdone, the fertilizer monopolists have used their control over key mineral inputs and key distribution channels to muscle out rivals. As a result, they've been able to engineer chronic shortages over the past 2 decades and keep prices high for nearly 2 decades, giving them 30 to 40% profit margins on products they have not improved in half a century. All of these additional costs to farmers ultimately increase prices for consumers. And the abuses only get worse among processors and retailers. Since the 2000s, the meat and poultry oligopoly has repeatedly used coordinated plant shutdowns to push livestock prices down while keeping protein prices high. The dominant egg producers have used a mix of collusion and coercion to throttle industry output and maintain a near-chronic shortage of egg supplies. Likewise, the troika of fluid milk sellers have raised the price of bottled milk by roughly 150% since 1996, but kept the price of raw milk paid to dairy farmers, important in New York State, I imagine, in a near-permanent depression. And, of course, we cannot forget the grocery retail giants like Walmart, who use their power to force suppliers to give independent grocers higher prices, eliminating price-lowering competition from the market. In short, the fundamental problem behind our food affordability crisis is that across our food system, we've allowed central planning by robber barons to take the place of actual free enterprise. This brings me to my final point. We've been here before, and we know how to fix this problem. Like today, in the 1920s and early 1930s, a failure to enforce the antitrust laws allowed corporate power to metastasize, leading to massive inflation, even in the midst of economic depression. In response, the New Dealers in Congress and the executive took 5 steps to restore free enterprise that we can and should replicate today. First, they passed legislation to directly break up dominant firms in critical industries. They imposed structural separations between vertical segments of key supply chains to prevent conflicts of interests. They established financing programs to help cooperatives and small businesses buy divested assets. And finally, they increased funding for the antitrust agencies 6-fold, launching the greatest trust-busting campaign in history. This was how New Deal Democrats solved the affordability crisis of their era. This is also how Democrats can solve the affordability crisis of our time. In short, we know what to do, we just need to do it.
Thank you for your very comprehensive testimony. Do you want to, Ben Ray, follow up?
Leader Schumer, I don't have a question for Basil. The only observation that I have here as well is with these record profits, with these conglomerates now, the federal government subsidizes them in another space, Leader Schumer, because while the CEOs at these companies are making record profits and their pay is doing very well, the federal government has to pay for their employees to get Medicaid and SNAP, the very programs that this president continues to cut. And I don't know why these folks, not only are they making it more expensive for the American people, but then they're the very folks that are part of the problem that are leading to the cut and devastation of these programs as well. So there's other legislation we should look at in addition to holding them accountable in these other spaces to make sure that they're paying the real cost of what it takes for their employees to live.
Great point. Our next speaker knows all about what's happening in the supermarkets because she's one of the leaders of the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers. and was going to speak about what workers in grocery stores and the food supply chain are seeing. Rachel, thanks for coming.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. It's been a delight to be here and to be part of this panel. As you said, UFCW is the largest private sector union in the country, 1.2 million members who work in every part of the food supply chain. Most well-known as grocery, but we're also in meat processing, distilling. We are the people who put food on the table for this community, for this country. And I want to talk about looming high grocery prices and what we can do to protect consumers and the workers in grocery, because prices are rising, despite what some people might say, up 30% since 2020, for reasons, some supply chain, some not. And what we haven't seen is those increased prices being passed on in higher wages for workers or lower prices for consumers. And groceries are a necessity, not a luxury. And Americans are hurting because of this affordability crisis. And our members see it both because in the stores, because they changed the prices, and because they're consumers themselves trying to feed their families. While there are several causes, there are some legislative solutions that we can talk about right now that are moving in the states and the federal. In particular, I'm going to lean in on surveillance pricing and electronic shelf labeling. Large grocery retailers are adopting new technology that exploit consumers and make it harder for struggling families to eat. Corporations collect all this information from us, where we go, what we watch, and what food we buy. And now with AI, they incorporate that vast amount of personal data into profiles that they can use to set personalized pricing for us. A store can calculate what your maximum pain point is and then reflect that using that electronic shelf label on there, which kind of operate like our LED prices on gas, right? They can change that in real time and remotely. And to add insult to injury, for us, ESLs are a threat to the livelihood of grocery store workers. That's a job. Price managers change the stickers on the labels and on the products. So this technology is threatening the actual work of skilled grocery workers. And we know it's happening. We've seen it in these large chains that everyone's been talking about today. Our employer, Kroger, has deployed it. Walmart is planning to deploy it in 2,000 stores by the end of this year. If companies can treat groceries like an Uber ride, then legislators must regulate this. Banning surveillance pricing alone without tackling the technology that makes them able to do it so fast, electronic shelf labeling, doesn't do the whole problem. And so that's why we want to combine those together and suggest, and we're committed to being behind it. So UFCW has launched a national campaign to stop corporations from changing prices in front of it. And we're proud to work with elected officials from state and federal level to address this issue. There is a federal bill here in Congress, the Stop Price Gouging in Grocery Stores Act, led by Senator Luján himself, that would prohibit price gouging in retail food, surveillance pricing, and would ban those ESLs.
Ms. Lyons, just real quick, surveillance pricing is something that a lot of folks don't know that it's happening. But can you just briefly touch on how quickly the prices change? If you went to the store and then I went to the store and someone came after us, we might all pay different for the same product. Is that?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
They can see there's cameras in every store. They see you coming in. They match against your customer profile and what they know about you. They know you're coming in at the end of the day and you're a new parent. That diaper is going to be a little more expensive because they know you're desperate and you cannot walk out with diapers that day.
And you're not talking about the paper label that's on there.
No.
It's when they replace it and they can change the pricing on the fly, similar to what happens to everyone across the country. On social media, for example, if they're using one of the online purchasing, we could all be paying different prices just based on all of the research data that they're using to manipulate what's happening before our eyes.
Right. You and I pay different prices in the store. We pay different prices than someone who's getting it delivered, someone who's buying it with a SNAP check, someone who's buying it using a customer loyalty card. Yes, they have the technology, and profit is the motive. So why wouldn't they use it to just get the most out of everybody? And that's why we think that Congress should work with, pass your bill, honestly, and also their state efforts as well. 7 states have already introduced bills on this, because we think unless you take action on this, and at the beginning, it's like the early days of the internet. Let's put guardrails up so that we can make sure that we are all paying the same price. And then we address this rising cost of groceries and the affordability crisis that our workers are seeing today.
Thank you, Rachel. And we've been joined by Peter Welch, who comes from an agricultural state of Vermont. And feel free to chime in, you know, we're trying to have a, but our next speaker is Lee Hepner. He's been engaged in antitrust and competition areas with consumers. So Lee, fire away. And he comes from a more conservative perspective, but still, if you're a true conservative, you want competition and you want strong antitrust, right? Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure I come from a more conservative or liberal position, but
excuse me.
Senator, I appreciate the introduction regardless. Thank you. I am from San Francisco.
Well, that undoes what I said.
Leader Schumer, Senator Cantwell, Senator Luján, and Senator Welch, thank you so much for convening this important conversation. My name is Lee Hepner, and I am Senior Legal Counsel at the American Economic Liberties Project. As part of our fair price fight, we have sought to understand how prices are being set in the modern economy. Prices are the signal of whether something is affordable or not. And really, to pick up on Mr. Wu's comments at the outset, they are being set by middlemen, whether it is an e-commerce platform, a third-party pricing agent, a subscription service. This is how prices are being set increasingly, not by the retailer themselves. We have passed dozens of laws at the local and state level addressing algorithmic price fixing. We have bills pending in many states, as Ms. Lyons mentioned, around surveillance pricing. I'm proud that many of those have made their way up into the federal conversation. At its core, it is a crisis of concentrated corporate power that has replaced fair competition with a marketplace rigged to extract the highest profits at consumer and worker expense. By the end of 2025, the bottom 80% of U.S. earners saw their share of consumer spending drop to their lowest share in 40 years. 25% of Americans and 33% of Gen Z consumers are paying for groceries using buy now, pay later services, while over 40% are reporting late payments. Subscription services have become pervasive. This is household costs, after all, and disconnected from value. Prices doubled over the past decade on services like Netflix. 83% of Americans watch streaming services. Only 44% say they are worth the cost, a problem that is increasingly salient in the context of a potential Warner Brothers acquisition. Meanwhile, profits in the real or non-financial markets are hovering at a historic high. In short, Americans are producing more, but corporations are capturing an increasing portion of the gains. People are being squeezed. For much of the retail economy, it was the price tag that communicated the fixed public price to all consumers. Today, online prices and digital price tags are capable of changing prices every 10 seconds, as Ms. Lyons was mentioning. It's not just the price tag itself, but it is the behavior that it facilitates, whether it is discriminatory pricing, dynamic pricing where prices change very quickly. A study of Instacart last year was observing that prices were changing for different consumers, whether based on their personal information or just scattershot sending prices into the market. It's no wonder why an investor called this the holy grail of pricing, is AI-based pricing. One report estimates that AI-based pricing will increase corporate profits by $4.4 trillion per year. Where prices are no longer fixed and uniform, the retail economy increasingly feels like gambling. Whether we call it surveillance pricing, dynamic pricing, or price fixing, going to the grocery store should not feel like pulling the lever on a slot machine. And the pathway to competitive pricing, which is key to bringing prices down, requires prices to be predictable and transparent in the first place. We saw the Biden administration take multiple steps here, enforcing the Robinson-Patman Act against price discrimination among large and small retailers. The Trump administration dismissed that case. We saw the Biden administration do a study on surveillance pricing. It was a revealing study that showed the pervasive nature of this conduct. On day 2, the Trump Federal Trade Commission threw out that study. Democrats can continue to lead on restoring some sanity to pricing. Fundamentally, they should be the same for all consumers in the same market, which is a profoundly popular idea across demographics. I look forward to discussing all of these ideas, and thank you so much to the senators and my colleagues for.
Thank you, Lee. This is a recurring theme here that we really have to look at. Our next speaker is somebody who has dealt with the issues of food insecurity and affordability for low-income households. Obviously, when prices go up, the people who probably get hurt the most are low-income people because they can't afford the food that they need and desperately need to feed their families. And so Ty Jones-Cox is Vice President for Food Assistance at the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities.
Thank you, Leader Schumer, Senators Cantwell, and Senator Welch. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Across the country, millions of families are struggling to afford their groceries. The Republicans' unprecedented and massive SNAP cuts enacted last year have made it even harder for these families to put food on the table. SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is the single most effective tool to reduce hunger and food insecurity. 2/3 of SNAP's more than 40 million participants are children, seniors, people with disabilities, and 1.2 million veterans live in households that use SNAP to put food on the table. SNAP helps children learn, seniors stay healthy, workers stay productive, and local economies stay afloat. But the Republicans' so-called One Big Beautiful Bill makes the deepest cut to SNAP in history. An estimated 4 million people, including 1 million children, will see their food assistance cut substantially or eliminated altogether. The most dangerous and damaging SNAP provision cuts billions of dollars in federal funding for food assistance and then shifts these costs onto states and localities. For the first time, many states will now be required to pay a share of benefits, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars annually, or even billions for New York and other large states. This is an unprecedented existential threat to food assistance for low-income families. If states cannot fully cover the required match by raising taxes or diverting funds from other priorities, they will be forced to cut SNAP or even withdraw from the program altogether. With this looming cost shift, some states are already making decisions that are delaying or denying benefits to eligible households. The number of people receiving SNAP is dropping in many states beyond what would be expected from the law's other SNAP cuts. If Congress considers any farm bill, farmer relief legislation this year, it is essential to also address the urgent needs of low-income families struggling to afford groceries, specifically by addressing this untenable cost shift for all states. We urge you to protect SNAP, address these harmful cuts, and ensure that every family in America can afford to put food on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think I'm going to have to excuse myself at another hearing, but Senator Cantwell and Luján will continue. We want to stay longer than 12:30. This has been such an informative, excellent panel. Is that okay with our panelists? And we have a few people who haven't been called on yet, and we'll have more questions for you as well, because this has been so informative and so helpful. Peter Welch, who's from the he's on the Ag Committee and from the agricultural state of Vermont, and the neighbor to a very nice state.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
I just wanted to ask you about, obviously SNAP cuts hurt the folks who depend on it, but what's it going to do to state budgets?
Right, that's a great question. So since states are already making decisions right now to reduce their SNAP caseloads, because state legislative sessions are happening now. So what they are doing is, whether it's over-verifying, just implementing barriers that are going to create, implementing policies that are going to create barriers and slow down. So right now, your state is determining, do we have enough? Because there's two big things that happen with this cost shift. One is an administrative cost shift, so now states will have to pay 75% of their administrative costs for SNAP versus 50%, as well as the cost shift. So right now, your state is putting into their budget to make sure that they have enough money to make the administrative cost shift that starts at the October 1st of this year, and then also prepare for your error rates, which will come out in June. So making lots of decisions right now. But yeah, your state is definitely worried about it, and this is high on their agenda right now.
Thank you.
And Maria, if I could just ask a follow-up to that as well, because billions of dollars.
Yes, but then I'm going to vote. So
Okay,
but
yes.
next, I think we're going to go to Visha Bhatt, who is a chef. And there is nobody that knows more about those food costs of prices than those chefs, because they're the ones who have to figure out how to make this work. And it's so hard. So I know he's gonna, but I'm gonna, while you're asking that, run upstairs and vote so I can come back and hear him. Okay.
My follow-up to what Senator Welch asked is arguably with the cuts to SNAP, billions of dollars of purchasing power that have been taken out of the market. When billions of dollars of food purchasing has been taken out of the market, what does it mean to farmers and ranchers?
Great question. So SNAP has a, yes, okay. A great economic motivator in that it ended up, for every $1 of SNAP benefits, it actually puts $1.52 into the economy. So one big thing, I do have this, sorry, here we go. It is a multiplier effect. So when households lose some or all of their SNAP benefits, they can only make up for so much, right? So this is going to hit grocery stores, and so that means it's also going to hit our farmers. This means less spending on groceries, which not only hurts revenue, but it also hurts the grocery stores and the farmers. And so this cost shift, what is happening is that when states have to use some of their money either for the increased administrative costs or for the cost shift, they're not able to put money into maybe their state agriculture budget. We saw that even a 5% cost shift for SNAP benefits could be as much as what states currently spend on their entire state Department of Agriculture. So you are talking about a direct impact to farmers, both because of less purchasing power for families, but also if the state itself is not able to invest in their agriculture department because they're using the money to pay for SNAP benefits.
And Chef, as we go to you, sir, you know, I'm reminded what this also means. We heard about the large number of small farms and ranches that have already closed, sold off, or bankruptcy. This is going to mean more of them. More and more of them are going to be negatively impacted because of this reduction. And that's, again, something my very conservative colleagues, they don't want to answer that question. You know, they're saying, oh, we're saving the American people money. No, they're just making it harder on everybody. Chef, you understand what small restaurants are going through day in and day out, the work that you do to help others, to advocate for others as well. I look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
I think it's working. Hey, all right. Technology. Thank you all very much for having me here. Of course, I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. I cook for a living. I've done so for 30 plus years in Mississippi, Colorado. Now I'm in DC. But I will tell you that food prices affect our bottom lines, and it affects everything we do, right? This is not just here in DC. This is across the nation. Independent restaurant operators like myself are struggling with decisions that we have to make every day. We have to either raise prices, and when we do that, folks like you get mad at us. We risk trust from our guests, or we absorb the cost, which many of us do, and then watch our margin shrink. Let me give you an example on how that works. I mean, so a simple dish like butter chicken that cost us $3.36 to produce in 2024 now costs a little more than $5. We haven't raised the price on that dish because we can't, because if we do, then you guys will stop coming in and eating it. And then I can't pay my workers and pay the bills. So these are pressures that ripple through every decision we have to make. Do we decrease portion size? Do we ask our staff to do more work for less money, or pay them the same, but now they're doing more work? How do we, do we cut our staff? All of those decisions, they're terrible choices. There are no good choices to be made here. And this, of course, impacts workers, right? When the food cost rises, they have less buying ability, and they have to go find a second job, third job, which means they cannot work as much. We spend time on training them or money on training them. All of a sudden, they're not available to work because they now have to go find other ways of making up the difference. And so what we do at independent restaurants, it's sort of woven across, communities everywhere. We are a major employer. Independent restaurants employ more than 11 million people. So we are a big private sector, probably the second largest private sector employer. And it's also the place, if you just think back, private and small restaurants are where most people get their first jobs. This is where people learn skills and responsibility and start moving up. Independent restaurants, we create ladders. We start as a dishwasher moves up to a line cook moves up to a sous chef moves up to a chef becomes a partner, owner, and we go open our own restaurants. That creates jobs across the community. That is happening less and less. And that is happening less because things are expensive. You guys know as well as I do that when you need a charity, the first person you're going to head up is somebody at a restaurant. Like, hey chef, can you provide sandwiches for our little league team, or and we're happy to do that, and we continue doing that. But even doing that is now something we have to think about. It used to be an automatic. Of course, we are in the community. We support our community because they support us. Now we have to think about it. And that's not a good thought or a good place to be in. Again, rising food costs puts pressure on everyone. Margins tighter, it becomes harder and harder to hire people, to train people, to keep the doors open. The choices we have to make have effects, or ripple effects, far beyond the kitchen, right? Because it now depends on we're now messing with folks' livelihood. I can't hire somebody, they need a job. And that continues, and it snowballs. We don't just serve, food to families. We support families. People that work for us are our family. We take care of them. We provide health care in many cases. We provide, small loans. All of those decisions that we have to make, that we were able to make with relative ease, is now harder and harder. So I want you all to understand how difficult it is getting, and ask you guys and our leaders to do something about this and tackle this crisis that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by my colleague from New Jersey, Senator Booker, but he does pay a lot of attention to food issues, and we very much appreciate that. And I don't know if you did cover the larger impacts on the restaurant industry. You probably mentioned it, but we should, continue to get information on this, because it really is, food pricing is, so it's an economic development issue. So you have less restaurants, then you have less vitality downtown. It just becomes a constant threat to our economies. Restaurants really do hold us together. So we're going to turn to Joe Maxwell, and then we'll turn to Mr. Calcrate after that, unless somebody has a question.
Thank you, Senator. I want to thank you, Senator Cantwell. Thank you, Senator Cantwell, Senator Luján, Senator Booker. Good to see you all. And as an American farmer, because primarily that's what I am, I wear a lot of hats as president of Farm Action Fund and others. I can't thank you enough. Today, 63 farmers will go out of business. 63. 63 of my neighbors. And these farmers will be coming here, and they're asking for another bailout from Congress. Fourth time in just a little over a year. At the same time, as it's already been evidenced, families are struggling to put food on the table. Farmers are going broke. Families can't feed their kids. And yet across the agriculture and food sectors, dominant corporations are posting record profits. There's a common theme here: extreme consolidation, lack of competition in our food system. When I began farming in 1980, the top 4 beef packers controlled about 36% of the cattle. Today it's 85% of the fat cattle. There were 56 fertilizer companies. Today there's 3 dominant ones, maybe a 4th one. What does it look like on the ground? What happens? How take these numbers and what does it feel like in the market? I'm going to use They use supply chain disruptions to gouge the consumer and take advantage of the farmer at the farm gate. 3 examples. Avian flu. Egg prices surged 300%. Corporate profits rose tenfold. Production had only fallen 7%, and cost only rose modestly. No competitors increased supply, so consumers took it at the grocery store. Fire, they screamed, when a Kansas packing plant was idled, representing 6% of cattle, of the capacity for kill. Dominant firms rushed and pushed cattle prices down, told the farmers, we don't need your cattle. And then told the consumers, oh, there's been a fire, we got to charge you more. It produced the largest farm to retail spread in America's history. Natural gas prices up, fertilizer companies screamed, as much 200% margins increase. Their profits increased 5 to 7-fold. Fertilizer companies themselves acknowledged at the time, in filings with the SEC, that a large share of their pricing is not tied to their cost, but how much a farmer gets paid. The more bailout money you give the farmers, the more the input companies are going to charge. That's how monopoly power works. That's the results. We also need to confront the role of commodity checkoff programs, because we didn't get here overnight. It was policy. Policy will get us out, but we can't make policy changes here because of something called the commodity checkoff programs. These programs were created to support farmers, but today a large share of mandatory farmer funds flows into marketing and policy, influencing the Congress. They primarily benefit the processors and dominant firms. When trade and lobbying groups come into the Capitol claiming they represent farmers, ask them if they represent the industry, and they usually say yes. The ROI is the industry. That means it's not the farmer, folks. For more than 4 decades, both parties have actually allowed the sliding towards monopoly control. As a young economic major, I learned that markets keep prices fair only when there's competition, and there is no competition. The good news is not inevitable. We got here through policy change. We can get back where we need to be with policy change. I really appreciate Leader Schumer, who's no longer here, and his leadership, and Senators, I appreciate yours. I see this roundtable as a true opportunity to restore farmers and families what they need the most, and that's competition in the market.
But can you, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, please, Senator Booker.
First of all, thank you, Senator. Senator Luján has always been taking care of me, and you need a big brother, even though he'll remind me I'm older than him. I cannot tell you how much the checkoff program pisses me off, and how you have educated me over the years to how awful it is. Can you just give some examples about like the absurdity of having the checkoff program used against the interest of farmers, independent family farmers? Can you just like point out the absurdity of that? And for the consumer, then it obviously drives up prices.
I'm going to use one that impacts cattle producers. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association gets almost 70% of their budget from checkoff funds. We have a small cattle herd, has already been described today. We need to restore it. One of the best ways to stabilize the market for domestic production is to restore mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. Those cowboy hats that walk this hall for NCBA will oppose it. Not because it's in the best interest of the cattle producers of the United States to oppose it, because it's in the best interest of the meat packers. Because we're going to quadruple the imports from Argentina. We're going to package that meat, and we're going to sell it out the door.
Lie to the American people.
Lie to the American people. And So that's my best example of how, what I
the
say.
absurdity, sorry, Joe, the absurdity is they are making American cattlemen and women pay money into the group that then uses it to hurt their industry.
Yes, absolutely, and that's true. It's true of the commodity programs. Senator, I appreciate your leadership, Senator Lee's. I know this is a Democrat, but bipartisanship on the OFF Act to try to restore fairness in the commodity checkoff program, and you've been there with the cattle producers and hog producers.
Right, and I just want to say, because Rachel's over there, like just nodding. If we were in church, you'd be yelling "Amen, Hallelujah" to Joe Maxwell. So I just want to give you an opportunity, if you can. The Trump administration, I remember the only time he used the Defense Production Act in his first term was to allow the meat processors to violate health and safety standards. And so now he's recently announced that they are approving more line speed increases in meatpacking plants. Can you explain like how not only is this Trump administration benefiting this concentration in this industry, which is more concentrated now than it was the time of Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle? I mean, that's the irony of it all. It's more concentrated since the whistleblowers of my grandparents' era. But he's driving up costs at the same time he is hurting the workers in this industry in way. And when I say hurting, I mean physically, more people are getting hurt, injured because of the policies of this administration.
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that softball. So 60 to 70% of American beef is processed by a UFCW member. When we've been talking about this highly concentrated industry, we're talking about 200,000 of our members processing that. And the industry has once again come back to the administration and said, we need to run those lines faster and faster and faster. Meat processing is more dangerous than car manufacturing for people on the lines. And they've announced that they want to run the poultry line, raise it from 140 birds per minute to 175 birds per minute, and eliminate the top line speed in swine slaughter. And this is just so dangerous for the workers and the food we eat, because if you're running faster, you're just not going to catch all of the contaminants on a piece of food and meat that has to be inspected. And it's bad for rural America, because faster line speeds could lead to job loss. And these plants are in rural America, employing thousands of people and the communities and the restaurants and the communities around there. That's why we're very thankful for Senator Booker's longtime leadership on line speed. There are bills to make sure that we don't have this swing back and forth between each administration, and that line speed is set based on safety for the worker and the food. And so we really thank you for your longtime leadership on that.
And real quick, Senator Cantwell, Mr. Maxwell, thank you for your testimony today. You know, the other thing that I'm reminded in the way you're talking to us today, to the American people, is, look, whether it's a small rancher that has a few head that may be going to auction, or it's someone that has a small herd, the other tax on small ranchers is because of the consolidation that we've seen with how you have to truck those cattle to get to somewhere hundreds of miles, there's a hidden tax, because if those cattle aren't of weight before they get on the truck, they're not going to get to where they need to go. And for the families that I represent back home, that's the difference of having something in the freezer or not. And that's the other nonsense with what they're doing. Hidden tax after hidden tax, the tariffs, it's one input after another, but it's also this notion that they're having to pay for the fuel and for the increased feed to make sure they can get where they're going. And so that's a whole other process that could be corrected if we just broke up this monopoly on what they've done to centralize processing. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Senator, you know the industry very well, and your farmers and ranchers in your home state, most of them are small. It really impacts them at a higher level, a greater level than some of the large ones. The large always makes out well.
Appreciate that, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, we're saving the best for last, because I'm pretty sure that so many people have mentioned this issue. But Mike, thank you, Mike Calicrate from RCAF, for being here, and I'm sure you're going to help us with all of this, given your particular focus.
Thank you, senators, for having me here today. It's a great privilege. Hey, Rachel, on those plants that are increasing their line speeds, think about how many of them have been allowed to go to self-inspection, while the small plants just get crazy amounts of inspection at the same time. So just another barrier. And Vishwish, would you, while I'm reading my statement, could you look up the return on equity for Cisco? and just let us know what it's running right now, you know, in view of competitive markets and whether or not we have them. So the return on equity, Cisco, right? Okay. My name is Mike Callicrate. I'm a cattle and meat producer with operations in Kansas and Colorado. Since I first got into the cattle business in 1972, retail meat prices have become increasingly disconnected from cattle prices. As monopolistic middlemen push producer prices lower and consumer prices higher, the producer's share of the consumer dollar is now around 50% in beef, down from around 80% in 1970, when we had a lot of independent meat packers all over the country working with independent grocery stores. What can be done? We must break up the corporate middlemen who are extracting an unfair share of the retail dollar while denying a fair income to producers and workers. We need to reform USDA's meat inspection service to make it more workable for small processing plants, invest in local regional food infrastructure, and outlaw government purchasing of meat from large multinational and foreign-owned corporations. That business should go to small and mid-sized slaughter plants, keeping the wealth from agriculture local, creating jobs, and revitalizing rural communities. In 1994, I experienced one of the biggest cattle market crashes in history when IBP, the world's largest meat packer, stepped out of the cash market for 6 weeks, dropping the price of finished cattle over $200 per head, nearly a quarter of their total value. IBP broke the market by locking up private contracts for cattle rather than bidding for them in the open market. In 1996, I joined Pickett versus Tyson IBP lawsuit alleging anti-competitive practices. The case went to trial in 2004, and a jury found Tyson IBP in violation of the Packers and Stockyards Act. The trial court judge promptly reversed the jury verdict, taking away the $1.28 billion jury award. Even worse, his decision eliminated the primary objective of the lawsuit, that being injunctive relief. How do we make them stop stealing? That decision not only set a bad precedent, but gave meat packers permission to step up their plunder. The take it or leave it low bids either drove cattle feeders into anti-competitive contract arrangements or out of business. We've lost 86,000 cattle feeders like me. Over half of our cow-calf producers are gone. Cattle numbers are at 75-year lows, far short of demand. We're now relying on imports at a time when dietary guidelines are re-emphasizing high-quality protein. Rather than exit the cattle business, I decided to sell meat instead of livestock, opening Ranch Foods Direct in 2000. In 2010, we opened an on-farm USDA slaughter facility, providing custom processing and carcasses for 2 retail locations in Colorado Springs and several wholesale accounts. Nearly all of our wholesale and restaurant business has been lost to COVID and big food service, Cisco. Small plants like mine need fair food policy. Small processors have essentially no access to wholesale markets due to unfair advantages and predatory practices of big food companies. Walmart's ownership of a new Nebraska slaughter plant is the ultimate combination of the concentration and vertical integration we have long feared. It's past time to enforce antitrust laws and break up the meat monopolies like Congress did in the 1920s. Otherwise, consumer prices will remain disconnected from prices paid to producers and will likely keep rising. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent summary on this particular issue that we've talked about. I don't know if my colleagues have any other questions that they want to bring up at this point, Senator Luján? You know, I did want to ask Mike on this issue. Why do you think we haven't made more? Do you think the complexity is in these legal frameworks, as we were starting off with Tim and others talking about? Is it that we're not getting, you know, Michael, we're not getting the right legal framework to be successful? Or is it the power of these people here and the public not understanding who's really gouging them?
I remember being on the governor's conference for beef in 1996, and we talked about Citizens United and just the pressure of big companies and lots of money making sure laws are passed and rules are written in their favor. So it's lobbying power. And the other thing is the courts. The courts have, in the case of the Pickett case, the problem with proving harm to competition and a rule of reason. Did they have a reason to use captive supplies to lower the market? Well, of course they did, because their competitors were doing it. And so there's been some terrible precedents set with particularly the Pickett versus IBP case. And so it makes people fearful to even use the Packers and Stockyards Act. We need those rules that we were talking about clear back before the first Trump term. We need those rules to be clarified, to do exactly what Joe just had said earlier. We shouldn't have to prove harm to the industry competition. It's a matter of fact, have you been injured by their illegal acts? And so we've got bad precedent, and we need Congress to step in and really force better rules to be written. And honestly, we cannot continue to allow secretaries of agriculture who have absolutely no intent of going against any of these big companies. We can't let them make their own rules. Congress has got to be more precise. And they also, after passing this important legislation, they have to be there when those rules are written, because the packers, the big retailers, the big tech companies, every one of them is at that table. But guess who's not? People like myself.
Senator Luján?
Mike, I'm one of the questions I've received from folks back home where we were able to protect some of those smaller processing facilities, as hard as it is. There was already a shortage of inspectors to be able to get down there to make sure that you could operate, that you could run, that you could sell, that you could do those things as a small family business. But after Elon Musk and, you know, all this doging and people getting fired, it's hard to find an inspector anywhere now. Is that also one of the problems that we're seeing today? So under the argument of saving the American people money, they eliminate all the folks that should be there to help make sure that we can get this product to market, help small farmers, but then prices go up as well.
So I've been under inspection for a long time, and I've seen it, some of the rules, some of the regulations, just some of the things like Almanza, for example, what he did under previous administrations. And it was, the whole system was designed to hurt small plants. How can an inspector go in there and find a reason to deny inspection? Whether it's the Humane Slaughter Act with you can't ever miss on the kill, or just a lot of other things like Legg was doing up in Montana, putting small plants out of business as an inspector. But we've never really had the leadership from the top that didn't work in my life. We've never had leadership from the top in the USDA that did not work for the big meat packers. And right now, today, we put all of this grant money into small plants during COVID after realizing they're the ones we should be investing in. They're the resilient ones. They're the ones who will serve community interests and state interests and consumer interests as well. And then we don't buy from them. Or we let them enter into an anti-competitive market where Cisco puts them out of every single restaurant that they're currently in, where school lunch no longer will buy from the local plants anymore, even though they're USDA inspected. And so we've had leadership like Almanza. Heck, he let rotten meat into the United States and then went to work for the guys that provided it, the Batista brothers with JBS. So why in the world would Vilsack buy from JBS and avoid plants like mine, who either sell our trim or go broke? And we are not taking care of these small plants. They need rescued right now. There's a small plant at Springfield, Missouri right now that's got $2.5 million worth of debt. They built that plant knowing that, oh, we got to build local regional, and the end is near.
Senators, can I wait? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Michael.
Tim.
Yes,
By
Tim.
the way, I think everyone in this room would agree that more competition in the middle layer is extremely important. But and in the Biden administration, we took our strongest shot at trying to improve competition in this area. And the fact is, we need stronger laws and more resources. I just want to get back to that because we just say we're going to break this up. It's not going to work. We need stronger laws. We really need to differentiate in this country between the essential industries that provide some kind of essential product and need either heightened merger enforcement or heightened merger review standards or something like that, and the rest of the economy. And food is, the core example of an essential industry. And I also think, if competition isn't going to show up, at some point you need to be able to threaten price regulation. And that's something we've totally taken off the arsenal. We're like, we can never do this. This is also true in telecom. If you're not going to be able to threaten serious remedies like breakups or price regulation, all of this becomes kind of a conversation that no one hears about. So you need to have government have actual remedies like price regulation and actual capacity for breakups, or else all of this turns into a farce that people remember happened 10 years ago.
Thank you. We're going to end this, but I did want to put, because it is important for us to also talk about what we are doing to strengthen the opportunity to, in a world of commoditization, helping. And so I think, Rob, you mentioned this issue of, so we in Washington State, obviously a big wheat state, but you'd be surprised that in the other part of the state, Skagit County, we've done a bread lab. That bread lab was about increasing the taste of bread product, and basically now every restaurant in Seattle wants this bread because we have increased the value of both on a protein level, a bunch of different things. And so, was that you, Rob, who mentioned that we should be doing more to help in a world of lower price commodities, add value to our agricultural products by growing more opportunities for them?
Absolutely, and I would give a shout out to President Biden and his administration for a huge investment in building a linkage there for connecting consumers directly to those who are growing product, local food procurement. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the Trump administration, that was completely pulled back. And there is an effort now to kind of reestablish that, but there's no funding behind that. But I think whether it's continuing to make efforts for that connection, whether it's also not putting all of the investments in selling product in export markets at a loss, whatever we can do to bring added value across the agricultural sector, I think is always an improvement, and particularly that direct connection between consumers and farmers, as we often talk about the farmers share, which is showing up here in the room. That number is always going to be higher, and a good quality product for the consumer.
But that is a big opportunity, and then obviously using AI for good. Like if you can figure out, exactly how much water to use on every acre using AI and drive down the cost. So I want to, point out that we do want to grow the agricultural economy in ways that as the world competition increases, we're there with smart strategies. But clearly, you've given us unbelievable data and information today to take action on laws that we should draft and drop next week in where the shortcomings of existing statutes aren't just getting us there. As you've all said, we've already been through the legal process. It doesn't work for us fully, and let's get this job done and push our colleagues to help adopt them. So thank you all very much for a really, really inspiring session about our challenges and how we're going to meet them. Thank you. And thank you to my colleague, Senator Luján, for co-chairing this with us, and Senator Schumer. Thank you.